Hello, my name's Andy Tidy and welcome back to another edition of Canal Hunter. This week we've arrived in Tipton. If Birmingham is the general centre of the UK's canal system, Tipton is the absolute epicentre. Because you see, if I pour in some water here in the lagoon at Black Country Living Museum, it could go anywhere to reach the sea. Consider this, if it goes to the west through the Dudley Tunnel, it's going to drop down through Stourport, down the River Severn and out into the Severn Estuary. It may flow to the south, in which case it will go through Birmingham city centre and down through Stratford-on-Avon and into the Avon catchment basin and then out through Gloucester and again into the Severn Estuary. It could go east down through the River Tame Valley, in which case it will go out to the Trent and through the Humber and into the North Sea. Or maybe, just maybe, it will go out northwards through Wolverhampton, on down the Shropshire Union and finally out into the Irish Sea at the Mersey. This location lies at the very heart of James Brindley's Grand Cross design. But the one way we know that it can't go is straight east down the Toll End Communication Canal. That area is an area of intense lost canals, and that's where we're going to explore today. Now it's worth giving a little bit of an oversight of the canals in this area. We're standing on the Wolverhampton level, which is on the 473-foot contour. But running parallel, just over to the east, there is the line of the Walsall Canal, but that's 8 locks further down. A gap of 2 miles represents the area of one of the best areas for extraction of coal. The thick coal was there, Broach, Heath, all those layers that I've talked about before, they were there and they were very close to the surface. So it made it a very attractive location for collieries and for ironworks. And amazingly, within a 2-mile length in a north-south direction, there are 6 east-west canals. 2 of them were through routes which you could navigate one way to the other, and the other 4 either ran out along the spine of the high grounds out from this end, or they came in from the valleys below, because we're standing on the very rim of the watershed of the River Tame. Running down from the north, you've got the Brady Locks branch, then the Gospel Oak branch, and then the Ocker Hill branch. Then there are the canals that we're going to explore today. The Toll End Communication Canal, which is an aggregation of 3 separate canal projects, the Dixon Branch, and finally the Haines Branch. Dare I say it, but this is probably the area with the densest congregation of lost canals anywhere in the world. My usual approach is to take a lost canal and simply go from one end to the other and to see what we can see. But today I'm going to do it rather differently. You see, the Toll End Canal was built in 3 sections and they were built in different times. So I'm going to go and review the route in the order in which it was constructed. But before we get started on the route down to the Walsall Canal, it's worth just giving a mention to Lord Ward's Canal. Now I'm standing in the entrance to the Dudley Tunnel. I'm next to the CRT support service block, and opposite me there is the basin leading into the Black Country Living Museum. If you've ever visited the Black Country Living Museum, and you should, there is a really quirkily shaped basin. You go into it and it's an incredibly tight turn to get round to the old lime kilns. Well, that actually was the original line of the canal. Lord Ward built his canal running out from the lime kilns out to the new main line, and it runs under what is now the Sea Cadet site, and then over the road layout, and then all you can see going backwards is the canal follows the back line of some houses, but frankly there's nothing there to be seen. The best I can leave you with is a few images from within the confines of the Black Country Living Museum. If you watch Peaky Blinders, you'll probably recognise them as the set where they filmed all the canal scenes. So, let's go into Tipton and start our search. We've now arrived in Tipton at Coronation Gardens. In September, this is a scene of a fabulous little village fete with roundabouts, candy floss machines, toffee apples, all sorts, and including of course the jam butty. But the interesting thing from the point of view of the Canal Hunter series is that this also marks the start of the Tipton Green Canal. And if I turn around, passing my friend Paul, who's photographing me, photographing him, just look over the wall just here, you'll see the line of the Tipton Green Canal descending down as a footpath, and what you can see in the middle distance is the middle lock of the 3 locks on this line. This section of canal was built in 1805. It was abandoned in 1960, and this section, including the remains of the first lock, was reinstated as part of a pathway in 1975. On the Tipton Green Canal, this is the only one that remains, but it's great to see some of the old sections still in place. Hinge points for the lock gates, the recesses for the lock gates. There's even the base plate for a broken off paddle gear. And this is the end of the old Tipton Green Canal in its first phase of being built. It then went across under the bridge opposite into what is now Kagan's Boatyard. This became Watery Lane Junction when the new main line was constructed across the line of the old Tipton Green Canal. On the eastern side of the railway, the Tipton Green Canal is really obscure, but the line ran along parallel to that group of trees through that industrial site car park. We're now at the bottom of the Tipton Green Canal. Off to my right there is the extensive Cotterill Farm Colliery, and behind me is the connection made from the old lower canal through to the Tipton Green Canal. And when that connection was made, effectively it became the Toll End Communication Canal. Immediately behind me you can see the Tipton Leisure Centre. But between here and the leisure centre there was a lock in all the workings you can see over there. When I was last here 8 years ago, none of these houses were here at all, and this stood in a secluded piece of wilderness. It's amazing how things change in such a short period of time. But as ever, the developers have been reluctant to stand on the footprint of the canal. So here, where the Tipton Green Canal met what became the Toll End Canal, it still exists as an open space accessible for the public. But it's not the collieries that made this particular area so famous. It became the site of the Horsley Ironworks, who used the coal extracted from the nearby collieries alongside their blast furnaces to turn it into some really high-grade iron. They built some of the most spectacular and beautiful bridges, including the Arm Aqueduct down on the Birmingham main line, which is, as you know, is one of my favourites. The story of the Horsley Ironworks really starts with Aaron Manby, who became the managing director in 1815. He revolutionised this company, and he sought out new markets for this amazing new product called iron. He started off, amazingly enough, building ships. He prefabricated them. They were for inland waterways, mostly in France, but he prefabricated them and shipped them down to London, where they were built up at Rotherhithe and then sailed across the Channel. But as you can imagine, Tipton isn't really the best place for a shipbuilding industry. So he turned his eyes to other things which needed to use something with great strength, and he started to make bridges. In the end, the cold was played out, and the Horsley Ironworks relocated a couple of miles across behind me, and they built a new factory at the end of the Dixon Arm, and they used the Horsley Colliery there to power the ironworks. In the distance you can see Watery Lane Junction, and here on the south side of the new main line is the entrance to the old Dixon Arm. The Dixon Arm was more generally known as the Horsley Arm on account of the Horsley Ironworks, whose new site was further down this section. There are no built remains on the Dixon Arm, but as is so often the case, the actual line of the canal, built in 1828, still is public open space, and you can see now the classic canal-shaped slot of land driving its way through a modern housing estate. From here, the main line of the canal continued on between those rows of houses, and a subsidiary arm reaching out to another set of local collieries followed the road out through that gap over there. Developers hate building properties on the lines of old canals, and the main branch of the Dixon Arm entered through those trees, came around under where I'm standing on a pile of old colliery waste, followed that boundary line around and down the far side into those trees. And whilst the Horsley ironworks may have disappeared, their graceful arched bridges remain an iconic scene on the Birmingham Canal navigations, and also the North Oxford. I could go on for ages about the Horsley ironworks. I think what I'll do is I'll put that in my memory, and I think maybe at the end of the series of Lost Canals we'll come back and we'll do some specific subject episodes, and Horsley ironworks is top of my list. Anyway, I said I wasn't simply going to follow the line of the canal. I was going to follow the sequence in which it was built. So I'm going to go to the Walsall Canal end and start working my way back up the hill, and I'll come back to this point and that will round off the episode. I'm standing on the towpath of the Walsall Canal, and what I hoped to show you was the entrance to the Toll End Canal, built in 1801. The aim was to build a side canal up through a couple of locks to reach the coal at the Cotterill farm estate. I say frustrating because I know there's not an awful lot to see. There's a winding hole, which is the wide bit of canal to allow the boats to come out, and there's an entrance, and the entrance is framed by a gas main that comes over an arch. Now, it's really frustrating because I've chosen to visit on the very same day that the contractors are down here. They've covered it in sheeting, they're going to strip it back to bare metal, and they're going to repaint it. This is bad news because I can't show you a video of it, but it's probably a good news for the people of Tipton because it means their gas supply will carry on flowing for the rest of the winter. Fortunately, I do have some stock photos, and they did let me have a little glimpse inside just so you can see how it looks and how it cranks up. Let's hope the rest of the line, as we go up the Toll End Branch and then through to the connection to the Tipton Green Canal, I have a bit more luck at finding some remnants. So, let's go up the hill, see what we can find. One of the Toll End Branch Canal came up underneath this car park to Brookhouse Bridge. Standing on the first built remains that we've come to up the Toll End Canal. This is Brookhouse Bridge, and peering off the bridge parapet in a westerly direction, you can see the line of the canal, now been using as a car park and a loading area, but it goes straight through there, curving around to the left by the buildings at the end. From the road, Brookhouse Bridge has a very distinct hump to its parapet. And if you get round on the eastern side, clamber down among the filth, you'll find the archway of the original Toll End Canal. It's certainly been rebuilt over time, but this is the line of the 1801 original Toll End Branch Canal. I'm now standing at the site of Bridge Street. You'd think there's some remains given the place name, but sadly not. The Toll End Branch, which is what it was, continued up through two locks behind the cemetery. Those two locks stood pretty much in the foreground, and the other just around the corner. The line of the Toll End is very distinct, and there's a well-made footpath, so I'll cycle up there and I will just show you some images as we go along. It'd be tempting to think that this is the canal. Actually, it's just a drainage ditch, always been here. But the line of the old Tipton Green Canal, the one that was abandoned even in 1890, ran just at the end of the meadow. But the Toll End Branch Canal came up and stopped just around here. The area was covered in collieries, and this was the prize that the canal was built to reach. Well, I did say that Tipton was the dead centre of the canal world, I now seem to have reached the dead centre of Tipton, and it stands right alongside the joining section that was built to take the old Toll End branch up to the Tipton Green. The line of the old canal can be followed using this path. It's quite distinct. It's not only been filled in, but it's been banked up with the rubble, but it does carry on like this right the way through. And we've arrived back at Tipton Leisure Centre. I'm standing on Church Lane. The line of the Toll End Canal came up this open piece of brambly land. And continued on behind the leisure centre before kinking right to join the old Tipton Green Canal. This old bridge may have lost its parapets on one side, but its canal heritage is unquestionable. And so we've arrived back at the Tipton Leisure Centre, back at that connecting piece of canal through to the Tipton Green Canal. And I suppose, strictly speaking, that's the end of this episode of Canal Hunter. But I'm a little bit frustrated because I know there's one other branch I'd really like to show you, and it's really close by. It's just a little bit to the south. It's called the Haines Branch. So let's break with tradition and go there and finish the episode down there. Well, this is the entrance to the Haines Branch Canal. It's one of the lesser known abandoned canals, kind of the obscure of the obscure, I guess. It was built in 1833 and it branched off to the right just before the bottom of the Riders Green locks. You can see it as a dark patch in the towpath behind me. It went in to get to some more collieries, but mostly it went in to the vast clay pits and brickworks that existed up close to the new main line. The entrance section is well and truly lost, but if I just go beyond Great Bridges High Street, there are some interesting remains to be found. Here, immediately beyond the main road bridge, the Great Bridge, there's the line of the canal full of reeds, full of water. And also full of the most amazing amount of filth. But it's more of a canal than I usually find on these hunts. A little bit further up, the line of the canal is now quite dry, but as you can see, I can get into the base of the canal and the wharf edgings are very clearly there. The further along you go, the less there is to see. The Sheepwash Lane Bridge does offer a really interesting clue to its past. It's a huge bridge for such a tiny drainage channel. But it reserves its pièce de résistance for its western face. Not the river entrance, slightly around. There's a second entrance at a higher level. That was the entrance for the Haines Branch. The Haines Branch came through at a time when there was a small aqueduct over the stream and ran through and out, sort of between the electricity cables and the modern stream. The Limerick Foundry lay just beyond the site of the old pub, and there were collieries up beyond, and around behind me there was another arm that led across this waste ground to the site of a brickworks. The thick undergrowth has forced me down to the side of the river, but the line of the canal was just on top of the embankment there. At last, the line of the canal has been redeveloped into a cycleway. Well, that's the end of the Haines Branch, and it's the end of this episode. Right now I'm standing by what is called the Balancing Lake, but it used to be a huge clay pit for the pump house brickworks, and they stood just to my right. It's hard to believe that in this area of urban tranquility it used to resound to the sound of banging brickworks, belching smoke, and collieries pouring out coal by the thousands of tons every day. But isn't that just the beautiful contrast of the Black Country? I hope you've enjoyed this episode. In my next time I'm going to go back to Tipton, but this time I'll go north, and I'll be looking at the 3 lost crossways arms running from west to east and heading out towards CRT's Bredley Lockgate factory. So, hope you've enjoyed the episode. See you soon. Happy hunting.